Welcome to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo. Don, how you
I'm
doing?
doing great. I'm excited to talk with Brian here.
As you can see, we're joined by a very special guest, someone that I've been looking forward to talking to for quite a while now. I know, Don, you know him well. I usually we do like a long introduction here, Brian, but Don, I want to know, when's the first time you met Brian and how old was he?
Good question. Age-wise, my recollection is I interned with the Bills in '88, and he obviously Bill Polian was there. The Polian family was there, and Brian. My recollection is he was in high school at the time.
Is that right, Brian?
88, close. Close.
Okay.
Probably 7th, 8th grade. Yeah.
All right, middle school, about to be high school, and he was around a lot. It was great because it just you could tell he was feeding into everything. He was well liked around the building by players. Just there was a real comfort level there, and we were more of a family organization back then too. So, yeah, that's my initial.
Brian, maybe just walk us through what's your first memory of your dad being hired at the Bills, and then you kind of coming around and talk me through, as a kid who grew up here and loved the Bills. The 4 Super Bowl years were my 4 high school years. What was it like being around the locker room as a kid with that team?
And if you don't mind, you dial it back even a little bit. Coming to the Bills from Chicago, right?
Yeah, I mean, so we had been on this journey where it was Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We were there less than a year. The Chicago Blitz of the USFL, we were there less than a year. And then my dad came to the family and said, all right, it was my older sister, Lynn, my older brother, Chris, and myself and my younger brother, Dennis, and said, okay, we've got an opportunity to go to Buffalo. And literally like, okay, where's Buffalo? Well, it's in New York. Well, we were all born in New York City. Our cousins were all in New York City, and had we'd moved upstate a little bit, but so when we heard New York, we were like, oh, we're going home. We didn't realize it was an 8-hour trip off the I-90 to go see everybody that we loved. So, but I do remember vividly all right, we're leaving Chicago, and even at that young age, I understood the difference between the CFL, the USFL, and now an opportunity for my dad to get a full-time job in the National Football League. And so we went and we had a blast. There was a Holiday Inn off of the Camp Road exit in Buffalo. It's now been converted to something else, where our home in Hamburg was not ready when we moved. So my mom and dad, myself, and my 3 siblings lived in 2 rooms in the Holiday Inn and it wasn't a short amount of time. It was over a month.
Wow.
And so there was a little convenience store on the corner. That's where we were buying groceries and going to the now defunct St. Mary's of the Lake for grammar school. But I have great memories of those years. And then obviously, getting there in my grammar school years and being able to stay through high school in our profession was a pretty magical ride. So that's in large part why I call Western New York home, is because in my 49 years of age, the longest I've ever lived in one place was 11 combined years in Buffalo. I went back and coached at UB for a little while. So my wife's from Buffalo. I call Buffalo home. The next closest thing I have is 10 years in 2 5-year stints at Notre Dame. So, I'm a Western New Yorker, even though I haven't lived there in a long time. I'm back often. I've always cheered for the Bills. It didn't matter, all those years my dad was with the Colts. The only time I would cheer against the Bills is when they're playing the Colts. Mm-hmm. But I've always been a Bills fan, have remained a loyal Sabres fan, which obviously is not easy.
I'm so sorry, Brian.
I love to come back in the summer and go see the Bisons, and like everybody else, I've got all my places I like to go get my wings and subs and all that stuff. So
we may just ask you more about that later.
Yeah. So Brian, somebody like Pat Mahomes now in the NFL, his dad grew up around the game. he was in the locker room, whatever. Maybe talk to people who've never been in an NFL locker room or have heard our show where we have former players and coaches on talk about the locker room. What was it like as a kid in 7th, 8th grade hanging out in the locker room with Bruce Smith, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed?
It was I learned about things far earlier than I probably should have. And they took great joy in educating Chris and myself specifically. I think one of the great lessons I learned was the inclusion of a locker room, like being around African American men, being around families of mixed race. Like that was never unusual to me because I grew up around professional athletes and coaches. And so, I do think from time to time, coaches take the locker room a little bit for granted, that we don't think that those real life issues bleed into a locker room. We know that they do, but I think by just the nature of sports, locker rooms are pretty inclusive spaces. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed, getting to know Ronnie Pitts and Thurman and, any number of guys that I enjoyed. And some of my favorite guys were not the superstars. I mean, everybody was trying to get a piece of them. And I do have good relationships and very happy to see those guys. But like for me, it was Mark Kelso. It was Pete Metzelaars. Kenny Davis and I have stayed great friends. I would see Kenny when he was a high school athletic director in Dallas, and I'd go through Bishop Dunn recruiting, and we'd find each other. There was a lot of great joy. I learned at a very early age what it meant to be a part of something much bigger than yourself. And I enjoy that. I've always enjoyed being a part of a team. It's why I chose my life's profession. And then, the fun that you get exposed to and the ribbing. And I think it's important for people to know my father, not only did he not want us treated differently, Chris and I, and then later on, my younger brother Dennis was around. Not only did he not want us treated differently, like he encouraged those players to abuse us. Like he thought it was funny. I mean, I've been taped to a goalpost. I've been put in a travel trunk and spun around for 90 seconds, and my dad would come by and he would see that stuff happening and he would smirk. He would laugh. He would, he wanted him. And there was not a single job in that equipment room or whatever it was that we were doing. There was not a job that was below us. Like we did every crummy job that you could do. We did. And I appreciate my dad for that. I appreciate the fact that he allowed us that experience, and that from a very early age, I learned that it didn't matter who your pop was. Like you got a job to do, you got to go do it.
That sounds like him, and I admire that. And I remember too, from seeing you in the ticket office, it looks like you were having fun. But then when I saw you out and about at practice camp or at the stadium, you were working hard and you were gladly taking orders from Woody.
Yeah, Woody and Hoge, my guys.
Right? Yeah. We had him on the show. People loved him.
Yeah,
like
Woody.
Yeah, I mean, my childhood is peppered with memories of Woody and Hoge, and I broke a hand in high school playing football, and I didn't go to the ER. I went right to the stadium to see Bud Carpenter and Dr. Weiss and Ed Abramowski, and so those are the memories of my childhood, and I'm so grateful. I mean, I'm so grateful. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I'm sure you have. I don't know who runs it. This Twitter site, the Bills VHS Twitter handle.
He's my friend. Yep, I contact him a lot on Twitter. He's great.
I mean, it makes me so happy. I watch these things, and to see myself as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid make a cameo in one of these videos because I'm standing behind Marv, and it brings back such great memories. And I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky for the friendships that have come out of it. Frank Reich is one of my closest friends. We spoke earlier this week. I mean, he's been a friend and mentor to me in this business, and Steve Tasker, and I'm just so lucky, and we realize how lucky we are.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Brian, Bill's VHS contacts him quite a bit, and he puts up some amazing clips. You were on the sidelines, and you were like right in the middle of the action for some of the most famous games in Bill's history. Comeback game, all the rest. Give me a flavor of what it was like being down on the field, during some of those iconic games in the 90s.
Well, the first thing is people will never truly understand how big and fast these guys are, and how violent the game is. And when you're standing next to it, it's pretty amazing. The other thing I learned was how hectic it is, and what a gift and a skill it is to be able to keep your calm when 80,000 people are going bananas, and you've got all this pressure, and to watch Marv and Elijah Pitts and Don Lawrence and Coach Bresnahan and all these, Ted Cottrell, all these guys, Walt Corey, all these guys that I watched growing up, and how composed they were when everything was going manic behind him. And look, there were times when Coach Levy would lose his stuff on the officials, but whenever he did that, he did it on purpose. Like, he knew exactly what he was doing.
Over officious jerk.
To see it done at such a high level in such close proximity was an incredible experience. And it is literally what led me to coaching. Going and being in Fredonia every summer and watching Marv and watching those players and coaches interact, and then feeling the adrenaline rush of winning and being on that stage, that is literally what led me to my life's work. I mean, I told my father when I was 16 years old, a sophomore in high school, I want to coach. This is what I want to do. And my mom and dad both tried to talk me out of it.
Wow.
Did Marv ever lose it on you? Did you ever do anything?
All the time.
To give me a story on when you did something on the sideline that maybe you immediately regretted.
Well, the whole reason that we were behind him is because the headsets weren't wireless yet. So everybody had a cord. So, Marv, coach would get scurrying down the sideline, and somebody would step on the cord and it would yank, and he'd turn around and I'd catch a ripping. And occasionally Marv, I mean, even then he was a little bit older and very, very weary of being caught in a collision on the sideline. And so if the ball was even remotely coming near us, he was going to turn around and hightail it. And if I didn't get out of the way and he ran into me, he'd get pissed. So I'm sorry, this is probably a PG-13.
No.
Oh, we're good.
Brian, we had Daryl Talley on, so we're good.
So but like any other coach, it was over 10 seconds later. It was on to the next thing.
Yeah, Spaghetti Factory wires down there too. But a funny story, Brian. I was in your house in Hamburg one time. I was in the ticket office. We were working really, really long hours. It was during the playoffs. Might have even been leading up to the Super Bowl. I think it was playoffs actually. And as you remember, your mom, Eileen, was very good friends with June Ferran. You all worked at the Blitz together, and the Ferrans hired me. And she came and she talked to June, tried to talk us off a ledge, or her, as we were working those late hours, and we were ordering pizza and everything. She's like, "You all need a really good home cooked meal." She said, "Sunday after the game, I want you all to come to our house." And I was living on a limited budget. I still had this huge appetite as being in my early 20s. And we go to your house, beautiful. It was a situation where you serve yourself in the kitchen. And I remember there were meatballs, and I was just a heaping mound of meatballs on the plate. And it was a plastic, but like quality plastic plates. But I walk in, and I almost going from your kitchen into your family room or living room, and I kind of tripped, and the plate of meatballs tipped, and I fortunately pulled my hands, and they all went, instead of on your white carpet, they went on my hands, and they were still really hot. And I remember turning around and going, and your mom was like, "Oh, it's okay. Are you okay? Did you burn yourself?" Like, no. I just almost wrecked your rug. But I just, working with your dad.
Were you scared that you were
Yeah.
going to lose your job if you dropped the meatballs on the rug?
It wouldn't have been a good look. Yeah. But
I can assure you her response to me would have been much, much different. I can assure you that.
yeah,
I think,
nice.
I learned a great lesson from, first of all, to have the career that my dad has had. That can't happen unless you have a wife that is 100% fully supportive. And my mom was not like my mom Eileen is not like my wife Laura. My wife Laura knew exactly what she was getting into because we talked about it. We said, "This is all right. I know you're born and raised in Buffalo, but if we're together, you're not staying here. Like we're gonna go on this journey." My mom married a high school history teacher. That was her high school sweetheart. She married a guy that was coaching on the side and reffing a little basketball and teaching high school history. And so, for her to support him the way that she did on their journey is the reason why my dad treats my mom the way he does. I mean, he's to this day, at both 81 years of age, he's incredibly grateful for the support and the sacrifice that she made so that he could do this. The other part of all of that is, like, it was really important to my mom and dad that it was a family atmosphere, that people felt valued, that loyalty was really important. And you saw that with Steve Champlin and Ed Stillwell and Vince Tobia, and all the people that my dad surrounded himself with in Buffalo were really, really loyal people. And to him, I've watched him in his career, and I've watched how loyal he is and how he values the people around him, most importantly, the players and the coaches. And that I've taken that with me. And unfortunately, in the world we live in today, it's not as commonplace as it once was. It's a far more transactional world that we live in today. There are some things that I was raised old school that I wish I wasn't raised so old school, but this isn't one of them. Like I value the way that my mom and dad brought us up.
That's really interesting and so true. What do you think, Brian, made your dad such a good evaluator of talent, slash GM? You talk about the people he surrounded himself with, and that's clearly a key to anybody being successful in the NFL. What made your dad uniquely successful, qualified, like rise to the level he did?
Well, first of all, he's brilliant, and he's got an unbelievable nimbleness. He's really, he's really quick on his feet. He's a critical thinker. He is a borderline historian. Has been a voracious reader his entire life. So I think just naturally being smart, he's got that alpha presence about him, right? Like when he's in charge. And look, when he was younger, that came out in different ways. And
Don has talked about it on this show more than once.
Oh, good stuff. Oh, that's great.
So, I think I've never been around somebody that loves the game as much as he does. I mean, I remember a summer ago together, and he asked me we were on vacation together, and I literally went to Walmart and bought a small whiteboard, and he wanted to talk about quarters coverage against quarters coverage as opposed to cover 3 against zone read stuff. And we're in a kitchen table, and he's in his late 70s at the time, and we're drawing. I mean, he loves the game. I think one of the reasons he was great and not just good, and unfortunately, this is something that I feel like, in reflection on my time as a head coach, I was not as good as he was. the man had courage. He did things that were unpopular. He made choices that were unpopular, but he knew them to be right. Now, he didn't make these choices in the social media age. Not that I'm sure it would have bothered him one way or the other. He had to deal with Larry Felser and Art Wander and whoever else. But he would do what he thought was right. And there is a little bit of revisionist history. Like when you look at his time in Indianapolis, everybody talks about, oh, well, he drafted Peyton Manning. Like, no, that was a conversation. There were a lot of people who thought Ryan Leaf was the better prospect. He picked Edgerrin James over Ricky Williams when everybody in America was screaming, why on earth aren't we picking Ricky Williams? He made Dwight Freeney
traded his entire draft to Ricky Williams, and look who turned out to be better.
He drafted Dwight Freeney in the first round, a 6-foot rush end from outside linebacker from Syracuse that just was elected in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He selected a running back with no ACL. I mean, Thurman Thomas had no ACL. And so he had the courage to do things that were unpopular, even though he knew that they were right. And more often than not, he got it correct. And so if we were going to make this analogy in today's day and age, it's Andy Reid. Like Andy Reid's winning 10 games a year with Alex Smith at quarterback, and he moves on from him and says, this guy who ran the spread for Cliff Kingsbury at Texas A&M, at Texas Tech in Lubbock against the Big 12 is going to be a better NFL quarterback than Alex Smith. That takes courage to make decisions like that. It takes courage to say, I just started the dynasty on Apple. Drew Bledsoe's been medically cleared, but we're going to stay with the 199th pick. So when you talk about the great ones, Coach Belichick, Coach Reid, and there's a bunch of others, right? I think personally, my dad belongs in that conversation where he's at, and Absolutely. They all have one thing in common. They have courage to make really difficult decisions in the face of public opinion.
That's courage. It's leadership too. And I want to get into here with the time we have remaining to talk about what you've taken from that in college, where you are now at John Carroll. But another thing I remember about your dad, you mentioned media that gave him a hard time. He was no fan of agents either. And that's an understatement. And I remember in the old building, if I needed to go up and see Jerry Ferrand, so you'd come up the elevators, you'd make a left, and then there was a kind of an atrium or whatever. And then your dad's office was to the right, Jerry Ferrand's was to the left. But to get to Jerry Ferrand's office, I had to kind of cut through the desk where Pat Kazar was. And even if the door was closed, there were times he was screaming so loud at an agent that I was afraid to go in that area. And Pat Kazar would be like, it's okay. And there's times where I'd get halfway there and his door would open. He'd bust out. He was just so mad. And he'd be like, oh, hey, Don, how you doing today? He brought it right down. And later on in my career, I had I was given the task of work as director of football administration. One of the things thrown at me was workers' comp. And part of that required me to go to the players' medical files and contracts and send them to the union, the league, the player, the former player, the agent. And it was a long, tedious process. And but when I was going through the medical or the player files from the guys in the 90s and the Super Bowl years, part of their file was a letter that your dad wrote to the players right after the Super Bowl and talked to them about what they should be doing in the off season. And he would say, wait, we can't wait to see you again in April for the workouts. But listen, be ready, because if you think last year was tough, this year is going to be even tougher. We're still talented, but it's going to be harder, but we know you could do it. That's why we drafted you. And I remember reading these letters, standing at the copy machine, almost ready to run through a wall for him. And I remember, man, if I was receiving that letter, I would want to come back the next day. And I wrote him years later, and he acknowledged it, which I was so appreciative of, just to tell him how much I admired him for everything else I knew him for. But reading those letters was just, and the public didn't see them, but I had an opportunity and a privilege to see him. And I thought it was just another layer about how great he was, probably dating back to being a history teacher. He just was so well worded.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that's part of what has made him successful is that he's incredibly loyal to his people, and from the beginning, I always understood because he made it very clear: without the players and without the coaches, none of us would have jobs. So whenever anything was prioritized, it was about the players first, the coaches second, making sure that they were comfortable and that they were taken care of so that they could go do their job to the best of their ability. And that's I've carried that with me my whole career.
Why Brian coaching instead of becoming an executive? Did you ever think about going your dad's route?
Good question.
Yeah, no, I'm far more relationship driven. I love being in the meeting room with the players. I think as a personnel, people are solitary at some point in their career. Most of those guys are scouts, and you're on the road 200 days a year, and you're watching practice at colleges, and you're sitting watching film, and part of that life can be pretty solitary. I wanted very much to be with the players, or in my case, because my entire career has been in college student athletes. I felt like I could be impactful that way. I really enjoyed the teaching on the field, and I really enjoyed being in the mix on game day. And that really this year has been the most difficult transition, going from 25 years of coaching to now being an athletic director. I find myself pacing in the press box the entire game. And I told my dad after the first 2 weeks, I'm like, I'm going to have a stroke. Like, this is awful. I'm sitting here. I can't do anything about what's happening. I can't help anybody fix any problems. I'm just an observer. And I told him, I'm like, I don't know how you did this for 35 years. Like, this is hard. But it's, my older brother, Chris, is in the personnel side. He's with the Washington Commanders, was a one-time GM in the league. I believe should get another shot. Who knows? My younger brother, Dennis, really has gone a very odd route. He's coached in the Canadian League. He's been a personnel guy in the NFL. He has been an athletic director in college. I mean, he's really got a unique skill set. And right now he's the GM of the Memphis Showboats in the UFL in the spring league. So, we all kind of migrated to it, and as did my sister. She's a teacher. What my sister and I do is exactly the same. In fact, we compare notes. The only difference was I was installing, punt coverage and kick return, and she was teaching, but lesson plans and organization and the way that we teach different students, very much the same. And she and I would compare notes a lot. So we all kind of stayed within the family business a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you touched on this earlier, kind of some quick hits, but from maybe take us back and right up to where our John Carroll AD, Notre Dame. You were there. You said 2 5-year stints. That was interesting. What made that not 10 years?
Brian Kelly Charlie Weiss got fired.
Oh, okay.
And so I got wiped out with the whole staff.
Yep.
And then about what was it? I think 6 or 7 years later, Brian Kelly called me up, said it was a mistake. I should have kept you, and would you like to come back? And right. So but that's coaching. I mean, there's only 2 types of coaches in the world: those who have been fired and those who are going to be fired. It's just like, it's the nature of it. I was sitting with this time yesterday. I was sitting in my office with Josh McDaniels, who was won 6 Super Bowls, and Josh and I are both John Carroll grads. We're sitting together, kind of comparing notes, and it's like for lack of a better analogy, you can't join the mafia and then get surprised when you get whacked. Like,
that's so true.
This is the life that we choose. So
that's true. You're talking to 2 guys here who've both been fired from the NFL. So we both get it. Let me ask you one question before we go to our final segment, where we ask you a bunch of fun, like, rapid fire questions. What was it like for you and your family when you finally won the Super Bowl, with your dad in Indy? How much of your thoughts were with Buffalo, when you won in Indy?
A great deal. for me personally, and look, I wasn't on the Colts staff. I was there as a family member. I was coaching at Notre Dame at the time, so I would spend a lot of time in Indianapolis. But my two brothers were both on the staff. My first emotional reaction was just pure joy from my mother and father that he had finally climbed that hill, and so deservedly so. My second thought was my friends from the Bills days, that they didn't get the chance and they deserved it and didn't get that chance. And then for frankly, just Bills fans in general, like for Western New Yorkers. The Four Falls of Buffalo, the 30 for 30 that was done, at the end of it, they interview my dad in his kitchen, and he's talking about winning the Super Bowl and his thoughts automatically going back to the Bills, and he tears up while he's talking about it. And I think, again, in what has become a very transactional world, that speaks to the connection that my mom and dad have to Western New York and the Bills. It speaks to the connection that we developed growing up as kids. And I think it was a great, I think it was very emblematic of the way that Western New York connects with people, that my dad is brought to tears because he's thinking about those teams and how they deserve to get there. And he got there with someone else and really, wanted to do it with that group. And I thought that moment, to me, I was weeping when I watched that on television.
It's funny you mentioned him earlier as someone you had a close connection with, Pete Metzlars, who of course was on that staff, and he was the first interview that Josh and I ever did, and he said the exact same thing. His thoughts came right to Buffalo. It was pure joy. Thought of Buffalo. We talked to Don Beebe a bit later. Said the exact same thing.
Yeah, he said
Josh
when Brett Favre gave him the ball on the field, in the victory formation, Brett Favre walked back, gave Don Beebe the ball, and all he could think about was Buffalo.
Yeah.
And it's like, damn, like you said, Brian, like what a powerful connection, that here's one of the greatest moments of your life, and you're thinking back to here.
Yeah. Now I will say this, that I learned a very hard lesson in my high school years that some people don't figure out until later on, and frankly, some people never figure out. Sometimes, sometimes in life it just doesn't go the way you want it to go, and we could talk about how the Bills deserved and they should have, but the reality of it is it never happened, and that hurts, but that is what real life is. And we all want the fairy tale ending, but sometimes it's just not going to happen. An undefeated Notre Dame team, is supposed to be playing Alabama in the Rose Bowl in the college football playoff, but it's COVID and we got to play in front of a quarter of a filled stadium in Dallas, and it just, sometimes it just doesn't go your way. And that's, the sooner you can wrap your head around that and pick yourself up and dust yourself off and go on, keep fighting, the better off you will be. And I learned that. I mean, boy, you want to talk about dealing with heartbreak, watching the pain that my mom and dad and this team went through and how they picked themselves up. I learned that lesson when I was 15, 16, 17 years old.
Awesome.
I thought you were going to say, Brian, that you realized in high school that St. Joe's is a superior high school to St. Francis, but
it wasn't then, and I'm not sure it is now. But
being a marauder here, I thought that's where you're going. I was going to be really impressed and proud of you there. Before we let you go, Brian, we do something called the 2-minute warning, where we're going to ask you just kind of 10 rapid fire questions, and we try to keep it to 2 minutes or less, and just give people a different side of you. Go ahead, Don.
Okay, your most interesting place to watch a Bills game these days?
My basement with my 11-year-old daughter, who's a sicko Bills fan.
All right.
What is your favorite Bills game of all time?
The greatest comeback in NFL history.
Yeah, nailed it. 3 people, dead or alive, that you'd want to have dinner with.
Oh, boy, that's a tough one. Don Shula,
Okay.
my dad, and Marv.
There you go. That would be an interesting conversation. So you're being introduced as the new AD or bigwig somewhere. There's dry ice. There's people around. What's your entrance song?
Oh, it's got to be something by Bruce, right? It's probably Rosalita.
All right. This
Famous from the Brick Bar, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. All right. So, best concert you've ever been to? Could probably guess.
You're gonna expect me to say, Bruce, the best live show I've ever seen was Coldplay in Chicago at Soldier Field.
All right.
I love Cole. I've seen Coldplay live 3 times. They're amazing. Favorite Buffalo restaurant, and what do you get there?
My favorite Buffalo restaurant is Elio DiPaolo's. Just combination of food and family and friends, and it's simple. It's chicken parm, but it just feels like home when I'm there.
Yeah, Dennis is still keeping that place going just the same way. It's great. Favorite cartoon growing up as a kid?
It's got to be Tom and Jerry.
When you were in college, what was your favorite stadium, favorite atmosphere, tradition in college?
When I was coaching in college?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say the OAC. We didn't have a lot of 80,000 seat cathedrals. To me, there's nothing like Notre Dame. When it's late October, 50 degrees, the leaves are changing. It's a magical place.
Nice. All right, the most annoying fan base in the NFL.
Oh, that's got to be it's got to be the Patriots. It's the evil empire.
There you go. What's a popular food, but you hate it?
Sushi.
Okay. Can you drive a stick shift?
I used to be able to drive a stick shift.
Good
It's
enough.
been a little while.
Fair enough. We going to ask him about his current employer.
Right.
We usually ask the players and coaches. We're about 50-50 on this last one here, Brian. Can you sing 5 seconds of the John Carroll alma mater?
No.
You don't have to, but tell us about this. What's coming up this season?
We're curious as to what your role is now. Obviously, as the AD, and kind of let people know what you're doing.
And are you recruiting in Western New York?
For what we kill it in Western New York. For
one of our,
we have a true freshman. Dorian Faison is a Western New Yorker, true freshman wide receiver. He's from up in the North Towns, one of the Williamsville schools. He's fantastic. That's not fair. Put me on the spot with the John Carroll fight song. I can sing every word of the Notre Dame fight song in alma mater.
Sure.
You always push it.
No, this has been a really interesting transition for me. I have a 14-year-old son that has moved 6 times, and so my wife and I made the decision, given everything that was going on in college athletics with name, image, likeness, transfer portal. We had to settle things down for a little bit and give our children a chance. If you ask my kids, where's your hometown? They can't tell you one. They've moved too much. So the only place in America I would have been an AD was my alma mater. I love it here. For those of you who don't know, we have 43 members of alumnus working in the National Football League. The GM of the Texans, the GM of the Raiders, Josh McDaniels, former head coach of the Raiders, Greg Roman, the new coordinator of the Chargers. 43. Don Shula went to school at John Carroll. So the folks on the NFL Network call us NFLU or the John Carroll Mafia. It's really a unique place. I loved it here. St. Francis grads, my older brother Chris, Dave Caldwell, former GM of the Jags, now with the Eagles, Tom Telesco, GM of the Raiders. We all played here together. So this is that group literally went from Bills training camp to John Carroll to all working full time with the Carolina Panthers. So it's a very unique place. I love it here. I love Northeast Ohio in large part because it's a lot like Western New York. I wish that the city of Buffalo would reinvent itself the way that the city of Cleveland has reinvented itself over the last 2.5 decades. But yeah, this is a great place. Our division, we're Division III. Our basketball team right now is ranked second in the country. We host the OAC tournament tonight and hope to make a deep run here in the NCAA tournament. So a lot of exciting things going on. We recruit the hell out of Western New York. I mean, it's always been, especially because Catholic education matters so much in Western New York, and our place being a Jesuit institution. So it's been good. I miss coaching. I'll go back at some point, but right now I'm where my feet are planted, and we're having a successful year, and it's been great.
Do they let you in the doors at St. Joe's to recruit, or do you have to stand outside?
No, because I don't have my Italian American flag on my. Listen, I have a dear friend who's a St. Joe's grad, and I tell him all the time, listen, we got head coaches and GMs in the NFL: Brian Dable, Tom Telesco, Chris Polian. You guys run every pizzeria on Hurdle Ave. So,
hey, don't disparage Franco's, my friend. That's great.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for your time, Brian. We've really enjoyed
Tremendous conversation. Really, thanks. Best to your family.
Thanks so much. I appreciate.
We'll be following.
Okay, take care.
Yeah. Yep. That's great. Outstanding.